Hey guys, John here with Osage County Guns. I've got 3 of Sig Sauer's Romeo 5 optics to show you today, and we wanted to give you a comparison video because there's not a lot of information yet available on these optics. We've got the Romeo 5, the Romeo 5X, and the Romeo 5XDR. I'll flip them around so you can see the tops of their boxes. We're going to go through each one very quickly, give you a quick unboxing to show you the contents of the 3 different optics, and then we'll show you a comparison of the 3 so you understand what the difference is and what you're going to get at each price point. First, let's talk price. The standard Romeo 5, which is part number SOR 52001, has an MSRP of $219.99. Next, the Romeo 5X, which is part number SOR 52101, has an MSRP of $239.99. And last, the XDR, which is SOR 52102, has a MSRP price of $299.99. A couple things to note on the Romeo 5, and I'll try to give you a better comparison in a few minutes when I show you the other models. The Romeo 5 uses a CR2032 battery, and when we first started selling and shipping the Romeo 5s, we had a number of returns where customers thought that these were defective, and we saw one of 2 things happening. Most commonly, we had batteries installed backwards, and the positive needs to be facing out. The other issue that we saw was that the intensity was turned so low when the optic was turned on, it looked like it wasn't working, and you simply needed to press the up button to increase the intensity of the dot to be able to see it. But we had a number of customers thinking that the sights were defective when they were actually just fine. One of the things about the Romeo line is that they feature Sig's Motech, which is motion activation. And so when the optic is either sitting, on the counter like this, or mounted to your weapon, and the weapon is just sitting in a safe, perhaps in your bag, the reticle will turn itself off after about 2 minutes of inactivity. It's incredibly sensitive, and we did have a couple customers contact us thinking that that feature was defective and that their sight wouldn't shut off. What we found is that it's so sensitive, if you just tap it or move it slightly, it reactivates. In the one instance of our customer, he actually had it in his safe, and his safe dehumidifier had enough vibration to cause the optic to stay on, which obviously increases the drain on the battery. All 3 of the Romeo optics are rated for a roughly 50,000 hour battery life, and that's obviously for the most part because they sit idle. The packaging and box contents on the Romeo 5X and 5X XDR are nearly identical. The optics themselves are slightly different, so to save time, I'm going to unbox just one and show you what comes with both. So we'll just use the Romeo 5X. Got the manual, silica gel, lens cloth. We've got our adjustment tool, same as the other. We've got the optic itself, which has similar rubber caps. And one difference we have here is that we have a AAA battery, if I can get it out here, AAA battery, and a different mount. I'll go into the mounts here in a moment, but I just really wanted to kind of show you the contents first. I staged the 5X and 5XDR side by side to give you a comparison, just to show that the bodies of the optics are basically identical. And as I rotate them around, you'll see that they are virtually the same body with just different markings. The Romeo 5X and XDR use and have the same package contents, but I wanted to show you the difference between the Romeo 5, which is substantially different in its housing and its accessories. One of the updates Sig made to the 5X and XDR is the battery. We are now using the AAA versus the CR2032. And Sig's got a pretty clear indicator of how the battery is installed on the bottom here on the underside of the optic. This is obviously a pretty simple change, but AAA batteries are much more readily available than the CR2032s, and pricing, I would say they're probably less expensive as well. If we look at the top of the optic, we can see that there is also a design change to the windage and elevation adjustments. So on the Romeo5X and XDR, we now have flush, windage, and elevation adjustment knobs, where on the Romeo 5, you've got the cap, which has to be removed, and then the cap itself does serve as your adjustment tool, where you would just remove the cap, and you can see the flat head. You can turn that over, and it does have the indicator of which way to turn, but you would use your cap to adjust. Now, you don't have to remove that cap, and we've got the waterproof, water-resistant flush adjustment. Obviously, we now have to have the tool which is supplied to make those adjustments, or a flathead screwdriver. That's the only one real downside, but it does let you make more quick adjustments if you need to. I've staged the Romeo 5 and Romeo 5X side by side to show you the difference in their mounts. They both come pre-configured out of the box to the height at 1.41 inches so that you can co-witness with iron sights. The Romeo 5 comes with a lower height base, so that if you don't necessarily need to co-witness with iron sights, or if you want the optic to sit lower, you can mount it in that manner. The Romeo 5X and XDR have an extension plate which actually raises the optic so that you co-witness on the lower third of your iron sights. Basically, you're raising the sight up so that your iron sights sit in the lower third portion of the sight when you're actually looking through and co-witnessing. The Romeo 5X and XDR have a set of extended screws included, because when you remove the base itself, you're going to install this extension, and you need taller screws to actually mount it, because they're going to extend through that riser. The 5 uses the same set because the actual height and the offset for the screws is the same. One of the other differences between the Romeo 5, 5X, and 5XDR is the reticle, or the dot. On the Romeo 5 and Romeo 5X, we've got a 2 MOA dot, and on the 5XDR, we've got the 2 MOA dot or a 65 MOA circle with the dot. And you can see the pattern. We do have the crosshairs on the outside of the circle on the XDR, but that is the only other difference between the XD and the XDR, and what also sets that XDR apart from the standard Romeo 5. One final point that I didn't mention earlier in the video is really related to the design of these optics. You're going to notice, or you may not notice, that the front piece of glass on the Romeo 5 and some of Sig's other red dots is not mounted flush, and that's by design. We have had customers contact us and ask if the sight was defective or if that piece of glass was installed improperly, thinking that there was a quality control issue, and it's really not. It's related to the design of the optic and the way the reticle or dot is being projected against that front piece of glass. So they did design it like that intentionally. It's not a defect or anything wrong with the optic, but when you first look at it, it's easy to make that assumption, especially if you're not familiar with the optic itself or Sig's line. But that is by design, and that is normal. So if you should buy one and you see that, that's totally expected and normal, and there's no issue. Overall, I would say that the Romeo 5X and XDR are definitely an improvement over the design of the Romeo 5. In terms of the upgrades or the enhancements to the features, I think that the AAA battery and the battery cap design is probably one of the best changes in the design of that optic. In general, there's no issues with these CR2032 batteries and the cap, but occasionally when you go to install the cap, it doesn't always seem to want to just thread on cleanly, and then you've got to restart. That's the biggest complaint I may have in general, but they definitely improve it with the design of that 5X and 5XDR. The bases are really just a user preference, so whatever you prefer. If you want the newer design, obviously you go with one of the two newer models versus the Romeo 5, and the Romeo 5 is coming in at the best price point. So if you want a quality optic at a great price point, you can always start with the Romeo 5, and if your budget allows for a slightly better optic, you can step up to the X or XDR. Thanks for checking out the video. If you have questions, leave a comment below. As of this airing or shooting of this video, we have all 3 optics in stock on our site at osagecountyguns.com, and you can order them there. Feel free to send us an email and also check us out on Instagram.